Welcome to the Southwest Desert. Today we're exploring the life of Antoine Leroux, an unsung hero of the American West. Though less famous today than contemporaries like Kit Carson, Leroux was equally esteemed in his time as a trapper, scout, guide, and Indian fighter. Our story begins on November 3, 1851. A government expedition led by Captain Lorenzo Sitgreaves is camped on Yampai Creek in northwestern Arizona. Their French-Canadian guide, Antoine Leroux, is preparing to scout ahead. The success of the mission rests heavily on Leroux's knowledge of the harsh landscape and its hostile inhabitants. Leroux rides off to scout for water, eventually spotting a small mountain in the distance. As he nears the summit, disaster strikes. Leroux hears bowstrings and finds himself under attack by arrows. Before he can dismount, he's hit by 3 flint arrowheads, 2 in the head and 1 in the wrist. Stunned, Leroux falls from his horse, cursing his carelessness. He should have known the Yampai would have lookouts posted. Fortunately, his skull proves harder than the arrows. The head wounds are painful but not serious. The wrist injury is deeper. He pulls out the shaft but can't dislodge the flint point. Leroux makes his way back to camp, troubled by what the others will think of his carelessness. He has a hard-earned reputation to maintain as the foremost authority on the region. But who was Antoine Leroux, and how did he gain such intimate knowledge of this vast, dangerous territory? Unfortunately, like many French-Canadian frontiersmen, Leroux never kept a journal. But from scattered records, we can piece together his remarkable story. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman, Alan. Please leave a like or comment. For further desert adventures, hit the subscribe button. The Leroux family settled in St. Louis in the early 19th century. In 1822, Antoine first traveled to Taos over the Santa Fe Trail, probably with the Robidoux brothers. Taos became his home base for decades. He married a Spanish woman there and received a land grant near Arroyo Seco. In the late 1820s and 1830s, Leroux helped establish some of the earliest trading posts in the interior West, including Fort Robidoux in Colorado and Fort Uintah in Utah. His first known expedition into Arizona was with Michael Robidoux in 1827. Near the Maricopa villages, they were attacked and nearly wiped out. The survivors joined James O. Patty's trappers, traveling down the Gila River to the Colorado. On a later expedition, Leroux met the famous mountain man, Old Bill Williams. These scattered incidents are all we know of Leroux's early travels, but his later reputation proves he must have explored nearly every mile of the Southwest. Leroux vanishes from records for about a decade, resurfacing in 1846 during the Mexican-American War. That year, General Stephen Kearny led his dragoons towards California, guided by Kit Carson, Thomas Fitzpatrick, and Antoine Robidoux. Following behind came Colonel Philip St. George Cook with the Mormon Battalion and wagons. Cook hired Leroux to find a wagon-suitable route, describing him as a most sensible and experienced guide. Leroux successfully led these wagons where no vehicles had ever traveled before. After the war, Leroux returned to his ranch near Taos. In March 1849, he guided Lieutenant J.H. Whittlesey's expedition against hostile Utes. Later that year, he served as chief scout for Captain Greer's punitive expedition against Apaches, who had massacred whites at Point of Rocks. In 1851, Leroux guided the Sitgreaves expedition we opened with. After his mishap with the Yampai, Leroux's infected wrist troubled him for the rest of the journey. The party traveled to the Mojave villages, then to Camp Yuma, where they were attacked by Native Americans. That they didn't suffer greater losses was largely thanks to Leroux's expertise. 1853 was an especially busy year for Leroux. In May, he met Edward F. Beale on the Santa Fe Trail, agreeing to guide him to California, but illness prevented the journey. Meanwhile, Two government railroad survey parties arrived in New Mexico, one under Lieutenant Amiel Whipple, the other led by Lieutenant Beckwith and Captain Gunnison. Whipple initially engaged Leroux, but Gunnison secured his services instead. Gunnison's mission was to explore a potential railroad route from Santa Fe to the Great Basin. Leroux joined in Taos on August 19, 1853. Gunnison quickly appreciated Leroux's expertise. He knew every mountain pass and could describe their suitability for a railroad in advance, saving difficult travel. After mapping the route, Leroux left Gunnison's party to rejoin Whipple in Albuquerque. The artist Heinrich Baldwin Mühlhausen, who accompanied Gunnison, wrote of Leroux, "The confidence which he inspired, a confidence earned by 30 years' toil in primeval wilderness, made us all rejoice at having secured his services." Whipple had assembled an enormous expedition, 114 men, 16 wagons, and 200 mules. They departed on November 7th, following a route that would later approximate the Santa Fe Railroad. Guiding such a large group through nearly waterless deserts placed enormous responsibility on Leroux. The expedition spent Christmas near present-day Winona, Arizona. After abandoning most wagons, they crossed the Colorado at the Mojave villages. According to Leroux, they were the first to pass without a fight. Continuing west, they met Mormons who delivered shocking news. Captain Gunnison and most of his party had been massacred by Native Americans in Utah. In May 1854, returning from Los Angeles, Leroux traveled from the Pima villages to the Little Colorado, discovering famous ruins in Verde Valley. This route was later shown on maps as the Leroux Trail. After these expeditions, the record grows quiet on Leroux's activities. He likely retired to his ranch or home in Taos, but the exact place and date of his death remain unknown. This uncertainty exemplifies the challenge in piecing together Leroux's life story. Despite his significant contributions, he has largely faded from historical memory. During his lifetime, Leroux was considered Kit Carson's equal as a scout. The routes he explored were later used by railroads and highways through New Mexico and Arizona. Yet today, his only monuments are Leroux Wash at Holbrook, Leroux Island in the Little Colorado, and Leroux Springs near Flagstaff, all named by Sitgreaves and Whipple. All who Leroux guided praised his knowledge and abilities, but sadly, none recorded a description of the man himself. It's particularly unfortunate that Leroux left no written account, as he was well educated in French and English. He was even selected as a delegate to the Territorial Convention at Santa Fe in 1851 and frequently consulted by engineers during early railroad surveys. As late as 1868, Leroux's letters describing the Southwest were quoted by authors, but no biographer discovered him in time to preserve his full story. Nearly all that's known of him is contained in the scattered records we've discussed. This represents a significant loss to Western history. Antoine Leroux was one of the most knowledgeable guides of the mid-19th century Southwest. He played a crucial role in multiple important expeditions that helped map and open the region. His familiarity with the landscape, waterways, and native peoples was unparalleled. Leroux's story offers a window into a pivotal period of American expansion. He witnessed the transition of the Southwest from Mexican territory to U.S. control, the decline of the fur trade, and the rise of government-sponsored exploration. His career spanned the evolution from individual trappers to large-scale military and scientific expeditions. Leroux's ability to move between these worlds, from solitary trapping to guiding wagon trains and survey parties, speaks to his adaptability and diverse skills. He possessed not only wilderness survival abilities, but also leadership qualities and the capacity to work within structured military and scientific contexts. Leroux's multicultural background is also noteworthy. As a French-Canadian who married into a Spanish family in New Mexico, he embodied the cultural mixing of the borderlands. His ability to navigate between Anglo-American, Hispanic, and Native American cultures was likely key to his success as a guide. In many ways, Antoine Leroux represents a type of frontiersman critical to westward expansion, but often overshadowed in popular history. While names like Kit Carson achieved lasting fame, equally skilled men like Leroux faded into obscurity. This reflects both the capriciousness of historical memory and the importance of written records in shaping that memory. Leroux's story reminds us that history is full of influential figures whose contributions have been largely forgotten. It prompts us to consider how many other Antoine Leroux's there might be, men and women who played crucial roles in shaping the American West but whose stories have been lost to time. As we conclude our exploration of Antoine Leroux's life, we're left with a mixture of fascination and frustration. Fascination at the glimpses we get of this remarkably skilled frontiersman, frustration at the many gaps in our understanding of his life and character. Leroux's legacy lives on in the geography of the Southwest, in the springs, washes, and trails that bear his name. It lives on in the maps he helped create and the routes he pioneered. But perhaps most importantly, it lives on in our continuing efforts to uncover and understand the complex history of the American frontier. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Southwest Desert. We hope you've enjoyed this journey into the life of Antoine Leroux, and we look forward to bringing you more stories of the unsung heroes of the Southwest in future episodes. Please leave a like or comment. For more desert romps, hit the subscribe button. Happy trails!